Hi guys. Tonight's devotional has a weird name to start with. Are you ready for it? It's the apostocycles. Can you say that? Apostocycles. All right. Finally, Joshua and the Israelites were living in Canaan, the land God had promised them. It was a wonderful land. Canaan was filled with grapes and figs, fields for growing crops and raising animals, everything God's people needed. But it was also filled with Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. What are those? They sort of sound like bugs or diseases, but they were people. There were many different groups of people living in Canaan when the Israelites showed up. This wasn't good because God told the Israelites that anyone else living in Canaan needed to leave. You see, other people in Canaan didn't follow Israel's God. They worshipped their own gods. The moon god, the sun god, the ocean god, the river god, lots of made-up gods. If Israel was going to be holy, set apart for God, then they couldn't bow down to any other gods. If they really believed their God was the true God, then they had to ignore all the gods that other people worshipped. But they didn't. Do you know what it's called when you ignore what you believe? When you walk away from your beliefs, it's called apostasy. That's a fun word, isn't it? A cycle is something that goes around and around, like the wheels on a bicycle or a tricycle or a motorcycle. At this point in history, Israel fell into a cycle of apostasy. When they went round and round, believing, then not believing, trusting God, then ignoring Him, it went something like this. Because they didn't make all the other groups leave in Canaan, the Israelites ended up living around people who worshipped other gods. Pretty soon, the Israelites started praying to those gods too, breaking their promise to the one true God. God had warned Moses that if the Israelites worshipped other gods, He would no longer protect them from their enemies. And that's exactly what happened. Israel bowed down to other gods, and God stopped protecting them. Then other nations came in and took over parts of Israel, making the Israelites slaves again. Being a slave is a terrible thing. So the Israelites turned back to God and cried, "Help us!" They said they were sorry for ignoring God. They promised never to ignore God again. And so God helped them. He would raise up a leader in Israel and help the leader free the people from their enemy. So the Israelites were happy, and they thanked God. And then do you know what happened? The whole thing started over. A cycle. Round and round. Once the Israelites were safe and happy, they forgot about God. Again. They bowed down to other gods. Again. It's like if you got in trouble for taking a cookie you weren't supposed to take. You got in so much trouble that you said, "I'll never steal another cookie as long as I live." And then, when you weren't in trouble anymore, you saw those cookies again and thought, "Those cookies look awfully good." And so you took a cookie. Again. This is what happened to Israel over and over for more than 250 years. When they were safe and happy, they would forget about God. So God would stop protecting them, and then they'd get in big trouble. Then they'd be so unhappy they turned back to God and say, "Help us, we won't do it again." So God would help them, and they'd be safe and happy again. And then they'd see another cookie. You get the idea. Bicycles are fun, motorcycles are fun, apostocycles, not so much. All right, our everyday truth for today is, because God never changes, I can trust Him faithfully. Okay, here's the parts to talk about with your family. Are you ready? The first question is, what does apostasy mean? Pause the video and talk about it. The next question is, why do you think forgetting their beliefs made life harder for the Israelites? Pause the video and talk about it. Okay, you want to pray with me? Dear God, thank you that even though our attitudes and actions change, you never change. Amen. All right, I'll see you tomorrow night for a bedtime story. Good night.